Welcome, everyone. I am Jacque Elias. We are here with Property Pros. We are going to be making sense of the property world. And today I am so excited to be talking with Jenina Snowling. She is a conveyancer with Rightmove Legal in the Wellington branch. So, Jenina, give us some insight into surveyancing. How do surveyancers fit into the property puzzle?
Thanks, Jackie, for this opportunity. So with regard to the property puzzle, so to speak, a conveyancer's role essentially is to oversee the transfer of land or property from one entity into another. But our role as far as the general day-to-day property is that we can come in a lot earlier, and in fact we should. So essentially, like if I was to look at, say, a person buying a property, they may approach a conveyancer right at the outset to maybe look over the contract, the title, a LIM report, and then the conveyancer will give them some advice on what they need to look out for before they put their offer in. Once they put their offer in, they find out, yep, I really like this, and I put my offer in, and it's accepted. The conveyancer will then help them work through the process before it gets to confirmation. So looking at just lead them on the way so that they're not left alone. They know the steps going forward. Then when it comes to confirming, they might have a building inspection clause that might have been in there that raises some sort of issues or any sort of conditions that might have been in the contract. A conveyancer is really good as far as sort of helping the purchaser, and they'll go back and negotiate maybe having issues dealt with the vendor or a price reduction. And then once that has all gone through and the contract is then confirmed, the conveyancer will then work through with the purchaser and just leads them up to settlement. So they sort of work through and let them know what the process is. Obviously, when in that particular part of it becomes quite a sort of more intensive area, and the conveyancer will sort of work in with a variety of people in the industry. So they'll be working with banks and mortgage brokers like yourselves, and real estate agents, insurance companies, KiwiSaver providers, and the list goes on, and councils, and
you're like
obviously
right in the middle, aren't you? It sounds like.
Yeah. So it's just basically moving the stress away from the client, and that's where we come in, and we just basically making sure that when we get to settlement, all those checks have been done, all the necessary requirements have been met, and our client is then ready to settle. So that's essentially where we are, and what we do sort of with Rightmove Legal. So the big thing for us is just basically taking the stress off the client. Right. So rather than them running around, it's having someone that just oversees and just looks after everything and leads them right into it. So so that's what happens.
So at the beginning. Yeah, so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. At the beginning, it was news to me about how you can look over contracts and all of that kind of stuff before an offer goes in. How helpful is that for people? Because I know there will be so many things in there that could trip them up later, right?
Yeah, it's to be honest, that's my if I could have my ideal world, that would be it. I would and real estate agents are really good at sort of reminding clients that, hey, I would recommend you get someone to look over this before you sign it. But the thing is, it's we can even go further back there before that. It's even when a client initially looks at a property, they really like it, they've been given a copy of the contract and or the copy of the contract title and LIM, and it just means that they're going in, putting in their offer with a complete knowledge of what they're buying. So all their checks have been done. Our role is to make sure that, hey, did you know that it's actually got this clause in there that the vendor's got in there? Were you aware of that? And you know what the consequences of having that clause in there? Or something might be too tight and restrictive, or so it's just bringing their attention to things. That's our main role. Any property is able to be they're able to buy and sell any property. And what we might see as not a very good investment, others may see as a good investment. So our role is basically just to give them all the information so that they go in they're putting their best foot forward and putting an offer in that is taking into account all those other factors.
So it sounds like there's a really good role for as someone is looking at a property and trying to research. So they might think, like you said, get the LIM report or all of the reports and think, oh, okay, now I need to make sense of it. But you can actually really aid in helping that process to say, obviously, like you said, different people are going to have an idea of whether this is a good property, but you can look at it from a legal standpoint where some of those what is it, little traps, there you go, little pitfalls might be.
That's right. I mean, the nature of our sort of business is obviously we're always very risk averse. Everybody goes into, when they've seen a client will go into a property and, their heart's melting because it's exactly what they want. Their eyes are on blinkers and this is it. This is their dream home. And so our role is to sort of almost sort of take a step back and just look at, okay, it's your dream role, dream home, but what are some things that we want it to be your dream home when you go to settle. Right. We want it to be, because there are issues that can crop up and they weren't aware of it. We still want it to be your dream home when you've bought the property. So
that's right. A year later, 5 years later, it's not a nightmare. And because there's so many things that have gone wrong with it, you didn't know what was going on, all of that kind of stuff. So that's really great because you are, sounds like you have the back of the buyer and really being able to help them make that good decision. And is that, it sounds like that's land as well. So not just when people are buying a home, it's land.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's right. And so as conveyancers, whether you be a lawyer or a conveyancing practitioner, we also do like refinancing. So it's basically any transfer of land or any where you're dealing with the land online sort of thing. So any refinancing, financing, like you say, purchasing land without a house on it, it's all included in the same sort of thing. So we will.
Right. So even if it's just like the refinancing, is that top-ups as well then?
If it's a top-up where it's going to affect the mortgage on the title, So if they're wanting a prior to some change or something like that, absolutely.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's great. It sounds like you do provide quite a lot of value for your customers in that way. And so how much is a conveyancer? That's always one of the big things, is that, if I am already making this huge purchase, how much money am I going to have to pay, for all these other services? So as far as how much is a conveyancer, I mean, that really depends on who you instruct, to be honest. Essentially, our role is very straightforward, and particularly for us that sort of specialise in just conveyancing, it should be the prices should really be around about the same. So, the big thing is, what I always sort of say to clients, look, there is no harm in ringing around and getting the prices of other places. The only thing is, I would always say, compare apples with apples. So when you're ringing around, just make sure you're getting what's the price at the end after your disbursements and your GST. You want the overall amount. And by ringing around, it also gives you a chance to be able to sort of get a feel for who you're going to be working with. This is the sort of person that I want, because you will eventually, as you're going through, this is someone that you've got to rely on as you're going through those stressful parts of the purchase sort of thing. So can you trust them? So it's, so ringing around. And so like our fee is we understand that obviously particularly for someone who's buying, they are, there's a lot of competing costs that they have to take into account, whether it's valuation, building reports, LIM reports, and onwards. And if you're selling, you've got the real estate agent's costs to bear in mind, as well as other sort of fees. So we understand that, but we don't want people to scrimp because of that. So our fee is a fixed fee.
and you'll see that it's very affordable and it's very competitive. We can keep our costs down. We don't have any fancy offices that we need to, fire up. It's all about just making sure that we provide a really good service for clients, and that they aren't scrimped in any way, but they're also not having to pay the earth. So essentially, they should be very similar, but unfortunately there is, in some cases, a huge extreme. So that's why it's always important to just ring around, and there's no harm in it. There's no offence taken by anybody. It should be just something that I would really encourage people to do. So,
it sounds like one of the things to make sure you ask for if you are ringing around is disbursements, right? Because that can be something that is variable, that can kind of change the price. You thought it was this, and then they add on disbursements and GST, and you're thinking, whoa, I did not budget for that.
That's exactly, and that's what we don't want. We don't want any surprises at the end. So that's why we sort of operate on a fixed price. I mean, obviously, we try and gauge as much information from the client at the initial outset to make sure, obviously, if they're going to be buying a unit in a very big body corporate sort of thing, the prices would sort of differ to someone who's just buying a standalone house and it's straightforward. But the fees are very fixed. They're very transparent. You can see it, so it allows you to be able to budget as well when you get into the end. So I know this is exactly how much my conveyancing is going to cost. There's not going to be any surprise at the end. That's what it is. So and the disbursements are built into our costs. So
I do really like that difference of Rightmove Legal, that you can you see the price and you just pay that. So that's exactly right. Everyone who's watching, just make sure that you are aware that sometimes the prices that are there are not inclusive. So always ask. Always ask. So we are in lockdown right now, which is why we're not having this face to face, even though I love chatting with you every time I can. So right now we are kind of in a different landscape, aren't we? The environment's a little different. Tell us about what are some differences to what people can and cannot do during this time, because I think that's a little bit, I was talking in a group with people who are property investors, and that's one of the questions that they're having is, should I still be looking for homes? Can I settle on homes? What if I had a deal that was already about to go through? So what's the kind of the rules now that we have to play by?
Okay, so just particularly with this at the moment when we're in lockdown, like you say, the main thing is basically it's preventing movement around outside. So we can't so when it comes to settlements and sales and purchases, people are restricted. They're not allowed to move into homes and move out because it's not necessary. It's not essential. But this lockdown period doesn't mean there cannot be any settlements. I mean, you have, if you're, for example, if it's a piece of land that you're buying or selling, there's no pre-settlement inspection. You know what you're buying, so that can go through. Obviously, financing can still go through. If you're purchasing a property that's got a sitting tenant in it and you don't need to do a pre-settlement inspection, then there should be no reason why that can't go through as well. In some cases, so what's happened is some cases the clients, the purchasers and vendors may agree that actually we want to stick with our settlement date. Although it falls in this lockdown period, we want to stick with it. And there can be a way to work around that. We can arrange to negotiate where the purchaser or the vendor will rent the property back from the purchaser from that settlement date, and then until they're able to move out, until the lockdown period goes and the level is reduced. So there are situations where you can still settle during this period, but for the main thing that's really preventing any sort of settlements is basically where there's a pre-settlement inspection that's required to be done, or that needs to be done to be checked that works have been completed. It sort of prevents that sort of changeover of keys, because the handling of keys. And obviously it's in all the cases that do settle during this period, they've got to have both parties have got to be able to sign their documentation, and they've got to have a conveyancing professionals who have the ability to be able to visually see their clients sign the documentation, to remotely have them sign up. So all of those can happen. It's just a matter of they're all different. There's no one size fits all. They're all it all comes down to the parties in these particular situations. So for those that can't settle during that period, the property law section actually brought out some guidance, which was really helpful, and it was basically saying that that a variation of the settlement date being sort of put in, or whereby settlements are deferred to 10 working days after the COVID level is reduced from a level 4 down to level 2 or lower. Or by another settlement date that's mutually agreeable between the parties. So some may think, actually, do you know what, I can settle in a level 3. There's no hard fast rule. They've just put that for safety, and they know that at that point, basically, everything's up and running. There shouldn't be as many restrictions. So you can set another settlement date. So that's what a lot of people are opting for right now, where they're in that sort of lockdown period. Their settlement date's already in there. So if they can't settle during that period, they're going for the sort of 10 working days after it's been reduced. But obviously, again, that depends on their circumstances, where they're at that moment. So, so it can happen. It just needs, it's basically working in with your conveyancing professional to working with the other side and see what meets both parties. The main thing is basically there may be a bit of give and take on both sides, so that's just the situation that we find ourselves in. But there's no reason why a lot of settlements can't take place. But there is options for if it doesn't. So
everyone is just trying to make do with
absolutely
the circumstances right now, right? So it's really just communicating and really kind of negotiating, what does that mean for my situation? So the conveyancer or your solicitor should be able to let you know what your options are in that case. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah,
no, that's great. That's great. Man, this has really been so helpful. I think that I have a really good understanding of that, of what you do and the value that you bring to your customers. Do you have any tips for any of the people that you see, for example, like property investors? Are there any common mistakes that you're seeing that people make?
So generally just before they sign up on contracts? So I think the biggest thing is basically just to make sure that you've done really good due diligence leading up to anything before you put an offer in anywhere. So just make sure that you don't feel like you have to make. One thing that really worries me is where people feel that they need to just put in a figure and they need to make it unconditional because they're going to miss out otherwise. And it's all very rushed, and they don't want to do any searching or any, because they just need to put this offer in. It's really important, or they don't want to because of the costs involved. It's so important. If I could just say one thing for the small, it may seem like a cost at the outset buying a building inspection, but as opposed to what could happen if building issues reared their ugly head after you've bought it, that you should have been able to find. It's very minute. And just on the topic of building inspections, another thing is to bear in mind that when a vendor has initiated a building inspection, really important that so as a purchaser, if you are serious about putting an offer in, I would always recommend contacting the building inspection company and arranging for them to have their building saying, look, would I be able to transfer the building inspection over into my name if I'm successful in this offer? And they may charge a fee, but it just means that you then are in a contract with that building inspection company, so that if anything happen to have been missed in the building inspection report, you've got to come back. You can come back to them direct. So that's one thing. And just basically just get your advice. Make sure you surround yourself with people who have your best interests at heart. Agents do a great job, and that they do a great job at presenting properties to people. So you just want to make sure that you've done, but they obviously can't do everything. So you just want to make sure that you surround yourself with those people that can. Being in close contact with obviously your mortgage brokers, getting a full rounded idea of what it is that you can borrow. Another thing that sometimes trips people up is KiwiSaver. So, for example, it's really important that if you're relying on KiwiSaver for your deposit, let your conveyancer know or conveyancing professional know prior to putting in your offer, so that the deposit, or even the real estate agent, because the last thing you want is basically when your offer goes unconditional, you need to pay that deposit then and there, if not prior, if there's something in the contract. So with a KiwiSaver application, unless that's been already put in and already in the pipeline, sometimes you have to wait some time. So I would always recommend having the deposit clause changed a little bit to say, upon receipt of my KiwiSaver application, or something, KiwiSaver funds. Just, that's a little bit of a trick for some people that can catch people out, sort of thing. So so there are lots of little tricks actually.
Yeah, but, that's great.
Oh my God. But there's another one with vendors when they're selling properties. Really important to disclose anything. That's it's amazing how many times you think, oh no, that's not important, they won't want to know that. Really important. If you think if it's to do with the property, it needs to be disclosed. The last thing you want is for there to be issues later on because something hasn't been disclosed at the beginning. It's just one of those sort of things. It's just a necessity to have had done. So but I mean, at all times my favourite types of clients are those that will ring me right at the beginning and say, hey Jenina, I'm looking at buying a property, or Jenina, I'm thinking about putting my house on the market. And it's at those times that we can talk through their situation, and then I can give them some ideas what to bear in mind, what sort of things to look out for when they're looking at particular properties, like a cross lease or a body corporate where there's levies and things like that. Or for a vendor, about disclosures, what sort of things they should be disclosing. And so it's really important to engage, touch base with a conveyancing professional right at that very beginning. And that'll help the process a lot smoother. So,
You have given us so much, Jenina, that I think that's great. I think we're now just kind of headed in the right direction and knowing what to look out for. And those tips that you gave, that's just amazing. I think that will really kind of be red flags and things that people can do to know what to look out for, as I said. So thank you so much for your time. I think
you're welcome.
I think the next purchase I do, I think I'll even know a bit more. Well, thanks so much. And again, you can find Jenina at Rightmove Legal. I will put the URL. She's in the Wellington office, so I'll put the address on the screen so you can contact her if you need to. And we will see you again on the next episode of Property Pros.